Hello, welcome to episode 3 of Back Office Hours by E-commerce Thinking. In this week's episode, we are going to help you answer the question of to ERP or not to ERP. Now, tons of D2C leaders are asking themselves this question and their team this question right now. As they're scaling, they're figuring out how do we continue to scale the back office and the operational side of this business, and they inevitably will think, should we get an ERP? Now, Andy and I have helped 50 plus D2C retail businesses implement and adopt ERP like NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics, and the like. And we've also helped a range of brands who've never adopted ERP but have still successfully scaled. And we believe genuinely that there is a shift happening in the way people think about and solve challenges in the back office. And this presents a really, really big challenge to ERPs and their relevance inside of modern retail businesses.
And in this video, we're going to look at why people choose ERP, why the decision is so often a mistake, what alternatives might be available, and how to make the final call.
Right, let's get into it. In order to answer why people choose ERP, you first need to understand how they reach the point where ERP becomes relevant or becomes something that they think they need. Now, if you go right back to the start of an e-commerce business, typically it will begin with like a system or a handful of systems, all of which are usually driven by the Shopify app store, right? So you start a business on Shopify, you then connect up different applications that enable you to do increasingly sophisticated things inside of Shopify, whether those be new payment methods, whether they be marketing tools, whether they be things like subscriptions. And then you'll also have like a integrated finance or bookkeeping system. Xero is really popular. Another one is QuickBooks. And then you'll have your logistics platform out the other side. But Andy, maybe you could talk us through this section at the bottom right where there's a ton of Excel documents.
Yeah, definitely. Businesses, startup businesses will always have spreadsheets in there. We see it all the time, whether it's for planning products, price lists, or financial reporting. There's always a good number of spreadsheets in there, and they do tend to complement the rest of the startup stack. Like Shopify, it's very easy to get data in and out, so it works well with a business that has started in that way.
And brands tend to reach like an inflection point, don't they, where
Yeah,
the demand from customers has reached such a level that it's outpacing the like operational capabilities of the business itself. And it's at that point, isn't it, where the spreadsheets and the manual way in which you're getting data in and out of systems and loaded into different spreadsheets that people start to question, is this scalable? Because team members are saying, God, things are really stressful right now. I cannot keep on top of everything. And then also, I suppose, Andy, there's like data errors, isn't there? Like,
yeah,
what's the inherent problem?
100%. It's always the team that end up saying, "Hey, we can't do this anymore. We're working all the hours of the day. These spreadsheets are driving us crazy. Surely there's an app for that." These are the common complaints, and it's the front end sales on the site are typically outstripping the resources that you have internally to run the operations, I guess.
Yeah, and this is a key point, right? So this is the key point by which leaders inside of these businesses, whether it's the founders or whether it's like the leadership team, they will say, right, how do we resolve this issue? And it's here where ERP comes on the agenda. Now, ERP comes on the agenda largely because when leaders inside of these businesses look around, so whether that be talking to other people that they know in other businesses, whether it be talking to like partners like web agencies, or even doing really simple Google searches, ERP just keeps flagging up. And they'll be hit by adverts or messages from the likes of NetSuite, from the likes of Microsoft, giving them a really clear one-stop shop for all of the problems that they're seeing. And that leads us, doesn't it, Andy, into the next section, which is okay, people are choosing ERP at that point because they have those like myriad of different problems and they're looking for the simplest way to solve those problems. And when they look around, they are met with what appears to be the simple solution, which is go for an ERP.
100%. Like, product management, financial reporting, financial management, inventory management, ops planning, reporting. This is really the sweet spot of the ERP sales process, I guess.
So we've explored there why people end up looking for ERP. And the main driver is look, we do not have the operational capacity to handle the amount of demand that's being generated through our web and channel sales. What ERPs promise and the big allure is the sheer breadth of different functions and processes that it promises to consolidate. So instead of having disparate processes in Excel spreadsheets, in a myriad of different tools, adopt an ERP and consolidate it all into one place.
Yeah, the last 10 years, all routes have led to ERP, right?
Mm.
Everyone you talk to, you get an ERP when you reach a certain level. And why do people say that? It's, typically ERPs market themselves on covering every area of your business, from product management to HR, finance, your supply chain, even your channels. So you have ERPs that do offer an e-commerce or a POS or marketplace integrations as standard.
Mm, mm. And herein lies the key thing that we want to emphasize to people is that what's promised and what ends up going live is very different. And you wouldn't know that unless you'd been there and done it multiple times. So this is the view that is, or the picture that is painted. And these systems are capable of doing all of these things, but it relies upon the businesses adopting them, complying with the way in which these systems have designed the different processes, and also the businesses themselves having the capacity to be able to migrate everything to a new system, often in one go. And therein lies a really, really big problem. And why, and it moves us on to the next section, which is why the decision is so often a mistake. Because what goes live in more often than not is a small subset of the overarching number. So in the previous section, you'll have seen that there was 50 ticks. Well, really, we've reflected upon this, and look, this isn't scientific, and we would do welcome challenges from anybody. But the vast majority of businesses that adopt ERP only take a small subset of the overall functional capabilities. And maybe Andy, you can just flag like and talk a little bit about like the finance and operations being a strength and why the other areas don't actually get taken up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've been involved in projects where there's been a really high number of ticks on this diagram, but I think for the most part, you're right. There are certain areas that we never see migrate to an ERP system, like e-commerce. Typically, always remains with a e-commerce specific software like Shopify. Point of sale would typically be another one. But then moving across sectors like HR and CRM typically live within, they customers have more success running HR from a HR specific program than integrating it into the ERP. CRM is another great example. A CRM like Exponia or Clavio has much more in-depth features that scaling e-commerce businesses are typically used to and use a lot than a CRM that is built within an overall ERP system, I guess.
Mm. Mm. So, and this kind of is a really key point for people who've never actually been through an ERP project before to be aware of, right? Like, the reality is that the vast majority of the functions that an ERP promises to be able to do aren't necessarily as good as the tools you've already got. So, in order to consolidate processes into one system, it's going to require you to compromise if that's the approach that you're sort of pursuing headlong. And really what we're trying to encourage people to do is to think more clearly and be better informed in that decision of whether to go to ERP or not. And I think that leads us neatly into the next section, where what we've done so far is given you a bit of a story as to how people get to the position where ERP becomes relevant, why ERP appears so attractive, and we've started to really unpack why that decision is often a mistake. And the first part is going in with unrealistic expectations. The reality is you are only going to use a subset of the overall feature set inside of an ERP system. Then let's just unpack like observations and trends in actually the reality of adopting ERP. And it's underwhelming in the vast majority of cases. I mean, we are actually doing some surveys with ERP users, and we'll be publishing the results of those once they're in. But the typical ERP implementation in a D2C brand lasts minimum 12 months, demands thousands of hours of your in-house teams, not to mention the agencies or the delivery teams from the vendor side or the supplier side. And then the costs, I mean, they are in comparison to other technologies that you will have adopted in your lifespan as an e-commerce business. ERP will likely be the biggest single technology expenditure that you've had to date. On costs, i.e., just getting a basic implementation, will typically go beyond 200K when you factor in all of the costs, not just from the supplier or vendor side, but the associated cost of integrating, of having projects managed, the time it takes your own teams to commit to these sorts of projects and divert their attention from other areas. And ultimately, and this is from McKinsey, like over 75% of ERP transformation projects fail to stay on schedule or in budget, and around 2/3 have a negative return on investment. Now, those figures will not be presented to you in the sales process. And if all you're speaking to are ERP vendors or partners, and you're not broadening the sort of scope of your investigations as to how to solve these problems in your back office, you will only find out how costly, time consuming, expensive ERP is once you're in it. So what we're trying to do here is help you see around a few corners and make a better informed decision. And for us, like leaders inside of brands, need to be aware of these trends and why so often people look back on that ERP adoption decision and think of it as a mistake, so that you can, before jumping into an ERP implementation, be clearer as to what the reality is at the other side. ERP is one option. What's the alternative? And historically, there hasn't been a viable alternative marketed anywhere near as effectively as ERP. And that kind of stands to reason, right? Like, the ERPs are backed by these huge businesses. You've got Oracle, who've bought NetSuite. You've got Microsoft that runs Dynamics and Business Central and that whole suite. SAP. These are huge companies with huge firepower to market themselves and their solution. And that then leads people to think that it's the only path. Well, it isn't. But you can take a lot of learnings from how ERP presents themselves and use that as a bit of a guide to the different areas that you need to cover in your own tech stack. And I think, Andy, you've obviously seen a hell of a lot of different ways of approaching these challenges. And I think one of the key things that we've picked up over the years is that you don't have to do everything at the same time, right?
No, absolutely not. One of the one of one of the best approaches we've seen is adopting the software that's best of breed at a point where the business needs it. So if you've got a really small team, but you've got large product range, then maybe don't adopt the HR software until your team grows. You focus your energy on your PIM maybe and your e-commerce product management, and that way you can, the slower adoption of the best of breed um, software, I think, has served people well in the past.
Yeah, and I think historically, I think a lot of businesses have said, okay, great, it would be brilliant to do that, but surely if we adopt these different systems at different stages of growth, we're going to compound the problem of capacity. Like our team is saying that they're overworked, that they're fed up of working in disparate places, siloed spreadsheets, loads of different systems, and that is a totally valid challenge or like reason not to pursue a model that requires plenty of different systems. But there's been a big shift, right, in technology over the last 10 years.
The tide's changing a bit. I think no code integration tools, and better process management in general, I think it is enabling businesses to adopt more smaller pieces of software that do specific tasks.
Yeah, and to add to that, so like when Andy says no code, there's like a whole movement going on where you've got business, like the various systems today that you might adopt in each of these areas. You might have a different system for each area. And in the past, you'd have been like, well, the integration challenge is going to be so big. Well, actually, the ubiquity of API driven systems where they've been built with the notion that they're going to need to be able to connect with lots and lots of different systems means that software is better than it was 5, 10 years ago. It is infinitely more integratable. Like you can connect these different systems up. And then the wave of integration technology that, look, Andy and I have been a big part of, we've co-founded Patchworks, we've co-founded High Cohesion. These are two integration solutions, but they're not the only ones. There's a ton of different integration solutions. We've done a demo of Make in a previous video. You've got Zapier. All of these tools are existing to help businesses use the best tool for the job in each area of their business and ensure that it's all manageable and that you don't lose control. And actually, the next image is probably worth just shooting up now because it helps demonstrate that. Historically, businesses would try and consolidate as many of these different parts of the tech stack into a single ERP system. And it didn't work. Like if you look at the track record, the vast majority of people who've gone ahead and adopted ERP, hoping to reach a stage where all of these back office processes were consolidated in one place, found that it wasn't possible. Now, it's not possible because each of these individual softwares is evolving and innovating much quicker than one system that tries to consolidate it all possibly can do. So the game is being changed by these individual softwares. And it means that if you did get everything into ERP, it would so soon be out of date that it wasn't worth the effort in the first place. So all of these things combine to really add weight to if back office tools that do a specific purpose can be adopted and integrated in a way that makes them totally manageable, then why aren't more people not adopting ERP and pursuing another path? And it just goes back to that point before. It just hasn't been as effectively marketed. And one of the reasons why we love recording these videos is it's our way of kind of contributing and making more people aware of an alternative approach to building out your back office.
I was just going to say the most obvious, historically, it used to be that the e-commerce channel was the most obvious demonstration of what you were just saying. Like if an ERP said that they did e-commerce, they probably did, but it wasn't their main focus. And you could see how quickly systems like Shopify were growing, adapting, adding new features, and typically ERP-based e-commerce systems just couldn't keep up with that speed of development. But it's not just the e-commerce channel, it's everywhere. It's for example the BI and reporting element. BI and reporting is not, can be done inside of an ERP, but the rate of development is like something like a Domo or a Power BI or Tableau, something like that. They are developing specific BI solutions all day, every day, and their rate of development in that area is much faster than it is for an ERP business that has a BI element to it, kind of thing.
You're absolutely right. And like we could wax lyrical all day about the innovation that's happening in different areas of the sort of operational side of e-commerce. Like it's not referenced on here, but there's a great system called Cogsi, which is all around your cogs. And it's basically it's taking the ERP's promise, but totally inverting it and saying you don't need one system to rule them all. You should get the best possible system in each area, and providing you choose them based on a criteria that says, how easy is this system to integrate? Is it possible for me to customize it? Is it possible for my team to adopt it without too much training? And also, and this is a key part, when you take a sort of, as we refer to it, as like a composable back office, where you're selecting tools that do a specific job that really integrate very well with the other parts, it then means that you can incrementally evolve your tech stack, which then increases the ROI on each of the technologies, but also means that you do it in a manageable way for your teams. So instead of embarking upon a 12, 18, 24-month ERP project where you're having to try and get everything moved over into one system, you're able to take it chunk by chunk. And yes, this may require you to research more widely, but ultimately it's going to increase your speed of transforming your business. And it's going to enable you to do that in a way that allows you to be reactive to the changing dynamics in the market as well, which is so prescient right now. Like we're sort of coming into headwinds, and businesses are looking for ways of making themselves more operationally efficient, reducing costs wherever they can. And it may lead many to say, right, this is the time really to adopt an ERP. And what we're saying is it may be, but please consider the alternative route and understand the merits and also the downsides of going for an ERP before you jump into it.
Also, plan for retaining some of these systems that you may already have in your stack because you've grown to the size you are currently. I mean, if you do go for the ERP option, you're probably still going to retain a whole host of the systems you've already got. It's not gonna replace everything. If you plan for it to replace everything, you're probably going to have an issue.
Good point. And I think that leads us like neatly into, right, what do you do about it now? So obviously we've recorded this video to try and help people make better informed decisions and really introducing an alternative way of thinking about and solving the problems in your own back office. We do make available resources that will help you take this further and start to answer the question for your own business. So check out the community.ecommercethinking.com. We'll post a link attached to this video to our post ERP movement, which kind of expands upon some of the themes and concepts that we've introduced here. We help businesses specifically answer the question of what is the best tech approach to scaling our business. So what are our commercial and operational requirements, and what is the tech strategy, including tools, processes, people, do we need in order to scale most effectively and meet our target?
As ever, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll be back next week. Any questions in the meantime, please leave them in the comments below.